What would you do if Trump's mass deportations targeted your community? Mass deportations are back. And this time, they could be bigger than ever. With Trump ramping up immigration enforcement, millions of undocumented immigrants across the U.S. are facing an uncertain future. But not all states are equally dangerous if you're undocumented. Some states are stepping up enforcement, increasing police cooperation with ICE, and making life nearly impossible for immigrants. Others? They've created policies that make it harder for authorities to deport people. But even those states aren't completely safe. And if you think that's bad, Trump just took things to a whole new level. Trump signs executive order to prepare 30,000 beds at Guantanamo. You don't believe that? Listen carefully.
We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantanamo.
This isn't just about tighter border control anymore. This is about mass roundups, detention centers, and a level of enforcement we haven't seen before. So today, we're counting down the 10 worst states for illegal immigrants as Trump launches mass deportations. From aggressive law enforcement to anti-immigrant policies, these are the states where undocumented immigrants face the biggest risks. Let's dive in. 10 worst states for illegal immigrants in 2025, Virginia. Let's kick things off with Virginia, a state that might surprise you. Some people still think of it as moderate when it comes to immigration policy. But don't be fooled. Virginia has been quietly cracking down on undocumented immigrants for years. And now, it's only getting worse. Here's the reality. Virginia has some of the most aggressive ICE collaborations in the country. Local police actively work with immigration officials, and under Trump's renewed push for deportations, this partnership is only going to ramp up. Ever heard of 287G? If not, you should. It's a controversial program that allows local law enforcement to act as immigration officers, and Virginia has multiple counties participating in it. That means if you get pulled over for something as minor as a broken taillight, you could end up flagged for deportation. Think that sounds extreme? It's already happening. But let's take it a step further. Virginia lawmakers have been tightening the screws on immigrants for years. Recently, there have been pushes to restrict driver's licenses for undocumented residents, making it even harder to live without fear of being targeted. And don't forget about Richmond and Northern Virginia, areas where ICE raids have become more frequent and more aggressive. Even in cities that claim to be more immigrant-friendly, ICE is still operating in the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike. So let me ask you, do you really think Virginia is a safe place for undocumented immigrants? With ICE lurking, local police cooperating, and Trump's mass deportations on the horizon, Virginia is a ticking time bomb. And if you think Virginia is bad, just wait until you see what's happening in North Carolina. North Carolina. Let's make one thing clear. North Carolina is not a safe place for undocumented immigrants. In fact, it's one of the most hostile states in the entire country. Why? Because the state government has actively made life harder for immigrants while giving ICE a free pass to do whatever they want. First, let's talk about ICE enforcement. North Carolina has some of the most aggressive immigration raids in the country. There have been multiple mass arrests in the past few years, with ICE rounding up undocumented people in their own homes, at work, and even outside schools. Now here's where things get really messed up. Some local sheriffs tried to push back against ICE cooperation, refusing to honor detainers, which allow ICE to hold people without a court order. But what did the state government do in response? They passed laws to force police to comply with ICE, even if local officials didn't want to. Yeah, you heard that right. Even in cities where people voted for more immigrant-friendly policies, the state government shut it down and handed ICE the keys. And if you think everyday life is any easier for undocumented immigrants in North Carolina, think again. Strict voter ID laws, limited access to driver's licenses, and a history of racial profiling make even daily tasks feel risky. So, let me ask you, if you're undocumented in North Carolina, where can you go? If the local police are cooperating with ICE, if you can be detained at any moment, and if even your basic rights are under attack, is there anywhere to hide? And if North Carolina sounds bad, trust me, when we get to Florida, you'll see how far this crackdown really goes. Because down there, they don't just target undocumented immigrants, they make life impossible for them. Georgia, if North Carolina is hostile, Georgia is a nightmare for undocumented immigrants. And I don't use that word lightly. Let's start with SB 529, a law that has been making life miserable for immigrants for years. This law punishes businesses that hire undocumented workers and restricts access to public benefits, which means fewer job opportunities, more discrimination, and almost zero government assistance for immigrants trying to survive. And when I say zero assistance, I mean zero. Need health care? Good luck. Need legal help? That's on you. In Georgia, if you're undocumented, you're completely on your own. Now, let's talk about policing. Because if you're undocumented in Georgia, every encounter with the police is a potential one-way ticket out of the country. Remember 287G? That ICE collaboration program we talked about in Virginia? Well, Georgia fully embraces it. In counties like Gwinnett and Cobb, local police don't just work with ICE. They actively hunt undocumented immigrants by checking immigration status during traffic stops, workplace raids, and even routine police calls. Let's put this into perspective. Imagine you're an undocumented worker in Atlanta. You've lived there for 10 years, have a steady job, and are raising a family. One day you get pulled over for a broken taillight. The officer runs your name, sees no license, and before you even realize what's happening, you're in ICE custody, facing deportation. And don't think you'll get a second chance. In Georgia, undocumented immigrants don't get the benefit of the doubt. Even minor offenses, things like driving without a license, can land you in detention and fast-track deportation. But here's the scariest part. Georgia actively tries to push immigrants out by making basic life unlivable. For years, lawmakers have been pushing policies that ban undocumented immigrants from attending public universities, make it illegal to rent property without proof of legal status, increase surveillance on immigrant-heavy neighborhoods. So, let's be real. If you're undocumented in Georgia, how do you even survive? You can't get a higher education. You can barely rent a home. Every interaction with law enforcement is a risk. And now with Trump's mass deportation efforts, the pressure is higher than ever. And if you think Georgia is extreme, wait until we talk about Arizona. Because there, immigration enforcement isn't just strict, it's a statewide crackdown. Arizona. Now, if there's one state that has made a name for itself when it comes to cracking down on undocumented immigrants, it's Arizona. And let's be honest, a lot of people support this. Some argue that Arizona is just enforcing the law, that stricter immigration policies protect American jobs, and that if you're undocumented, you shouldn't be here in the first place. Drop a comment right now. Should undocumented immigrants be deported, or should states offer more protection? Because when you actually look at what's happening in Arizona, it's not just about law enforcement. It's about creating an environment where undocumented immigrants can't survive. Let's talk about SB 1070, one of the most controversial immigration laws in US history. This law, often called the Show Me Your Papers law, allowed police to demand proof of legal status from anyone they suspected of being undocumented. Let that sink in. You don't have to commit a crime. You don't have to be caught doing anything wrong. If you look undocumented, that's enough for police to stop and question you. Now, while parts of SB 1070 were struck down, the damage was already done. It created fear, racial profiling, and mass deportations, and it paved the way for even stricter laws that make Arizona a dangerous place for immigrants. But wait, it doesn't stop at policing. Arizona has also passed laws that ban undocumented immigrants from receiving in-state tuition, even if they've lived in Arizona their entire lives. Make it nearly impossible to rent housing without proof of legal status. Deny driver's licenses to DACA recipients, even though they're legally allowed to work in the US. So let's put this into perspective. Imagine you're an undocumented immigrant in Phoenix. You've built a life here. You have a job, you pay taxes, you contribute to the economy. But now, you can't drive. You can't afford college. You live in fear of being stopped by police, just for existing. And with Trump's new deportation push, the fear is back. The raids are back. The risk is higher than ever. So again, do you think Arizona is just enforcing the law? Or is this a system designed to push immigrants out? Because if you think this is extreme, just wait until we get to Illinois, a state that many people believe is safe for immigrants. But the reality? It's not that simple. New Jersey. Another state that a lot of people assume is immigrant-friendly. After all, it's a sanctuary state, right? It has some of the strongest pro-immigrant policies in the US, including driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants, in-state tuition for undocumented students, restrictions on local police cooperating with IC. So why is New Jersey on this list? Because none of that matters if ICE finds a way around it. Let's talk about ICE's secret weapon, courthouse arrests. See, in some states, local police aren't allowed to hand over undocumented immigrants to ICE. But ICE doesn't need local police if they can just grab people at the courthouse. And that's exactly what's happening in New Jersey. Immigrants who show up for routine court cases, traffic tickets, child custody hearings, even reporting a crime, are getting arrested by ICE right outside the courthouse. Think about that for a second. You're undocumented, but you're trying to do the right thing. Maybe you have a court date for a minor offense. Maybe you're a victim of a crime and you're trying to testify. But as soon as you walk outside the courthouse doors, ICE is waiting. Does that sound like a safe state to you? And here's the even bigger issue. New Jersey is home to one of the largest ICE detention centers on the East Coast. The Elizabeth Detention Center has been accused of inhumane conditions, overcrowding, and denying detainees basic medical care. So let's be real. Yes, New Jersey has strong immigrant protections. But what good are they if ICE can just go around them? And if you think New Jersey is tough, just wait until we get to New York. A state where ICE isn't just operating in the shadows. They're cracking down harder than ever. New York. All right, let's talk about New York. A state that a lot of people think is one of the best places for undocumented immigrants. And on the surface, that makes sense. New York has some of the strongest immigrant protections in the country. A statewide sanctuary law that limits cooperation with ICE. Access to driver's licenses for undocumented residents. Free legal assistance for immigrants facing deportation. Sounds like a safe haven, right? But here's the ugly truth. New York is still one of the worst states for undocumented immigrants. Why? Because ICE never left. Let's start with Operation Palladium. Under the Trump administration, ICE started an aggressive crackdown in New York, specifically targeting sanctuary cities. And even after Biden took office, ICE never slowed down. In fact, in the past year alone, ICE arrests in New York have surged. And here's where things get even worse. ICE has been increasing its use of undercover tactics, agents disguising themselves as local police, tracking immigrants using advanced surveillance technology, raiding homes and workplaces without warning. Imagine this. You're undocumented, but you've built a life in New York. You go to work every day, pay taxes, contribute to your community. One day you hear a knock on your door. Someone says, "Police, open up." You think it's NYPD, maybe a routine check. You open the door, and suddenly you're in ICE custody. And let's not forget about Rikers Island. Yes, New York is a sanctuary state, but Rikers, one of the most notorious jails in the US, has a history of working with ICE. Immigrants who end up there for even minor offenses have been transferred straight to federal immigration authorities. So let me ask you, does New York really deserve its reputation as a safe state for immigrants? If ICE is still operating freely, if deportation numbers are climbing, and if even local law enforcement is finding loopholes to cooperate, how safe is it really? And if you think New York is tough, just wait until we talk about Florida. Because under Governor Ron DeSantis, Florida is leading the charge on some of the harshest immigration crackdowns in US history. Florida, if there's one state that's leading the charge in Trump's immigration crackdown, it's Florida. And if you think that's just politics, think again. Florida has gone all in on anti-immigration policies. Governor Ron DeSantis has turned Florida into one of the most dangerous states for undocumented immigrants, and he's not hiding it. Just look at Senate Bill 1718, one of the strictest immigration laws in modern US history. Hospitals are now required to collect immigration status from patients. That means if you're undocumented and need medical care, just walking into a hospital could put you at risk. Harsh penalties for businesses that hire undocumented workers. Employers who don't use E-Verify can face massive fines and even lose their business licenses. Criminal charges for transporting undocumented people. If you drive an undocumented family member across state lines, you could be arrested. Think about that for a second. This isn't just targeting immigrants, it's criminalizing people who help them. And that's just the start. Florida's police have some of the closest ties to ICE in the country. DeSantis even sent state law enforcement to Texas to assist with immigration arrests. So let's put this into perspective. Imagine you've been living in Florida for 10 years. You have a job, a family, and a life here. Suddenly your employer is forced to fire you because of the new law. You need to go to the hospital, but now you're afraid they'll report you. Your neighbor, who used to help you with rides, won't do it anymore, because if they get caught driving you, they could go to jail. How do you even function in this state anymore? And here's the real kicker. Even people who are here legally are starting to leave Florida. Farm workers, construction workers, service industry workers, entire communities are disappearing. Businesses are struggling. Crops are rotting in the fields because there's no one left to pick them. So let's ask the question, are these policies actually working? Or is Florida hurting itself more than it's hurting immigrants? Because this isn't just about law enforcement. This is about changing the fabric of Florida's economy and society. So tell me, do you think Florida is handling immigration the right way? Or is this crackdown doing more harm than good? So let's recap. Virginia and North Carolina are turning local police into ICE agents. Georgia and Florida are making life nearly impossible for undocumented workers. And Arizona? Well, they've been cracking down for years. So where do undocumented immigrants go now? So, there you have it. The 10 worst states for undocumented immigrants as Trump launches mass deportations. Some states are going all in, making life nearly impossible for the undocumented. Others claim to be sanctuary states but still have hidden dangers. So let's hear it. What do you think? Are these states enforcing the law or going too far? Are mass deportations necessary, or is this a policy that will backfire? Which side are you on? Should the US deport undocumented immigrants, or is this going too far? And if you found this video eye-opening, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. Because in today's world, understanding what's happening isn't an option, it's a necessity. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.